a lot of writing is involved with philosophy. And then, so yeah, moving on to why should more people learn about it, especially younger students. Philosophy, I think, really encourages students and curious people to and think about how to develop arguments. And not a lot of younger students are exposed to resources and courses that they can take about philosophy before college or like higher levels of education that they might not even have access to. So I think it's important that we try to spread that knowledge basically, and make it more accessible, or try to do that through our platform. And number two, once again, philosophy also really fosters reasoning, writing, and reading skills. And three, it also develops curiosity and a flexible way of thinking. So yeah, and as I wrote down here, that is why our mission is to learn about it first ourselves through workshops like these, and then share it with others. So yeah, moving on. Okay, so I guess since we're just recording this, we can just skip this slide. Here are some philosophers that many students commonly learn about in their classrooms. And if any of you guys want to delve deeper into these philosophers that you've already heard of and want to know more about, just put them down in the research topic suggestion Google form that we put out earlier last week. And then moving on. So I just had a couple good book and recommendations that I've personally all read that I wanted to suggest to you guys if you're just starting out with philosophy. I know we're all on like different levels regarding our familiarity with philosophy. So yeah. Okay, so starting out, I have The Republic and The Credo and Apology, all by Plato. They're all good introductory books. Plato is very often the starting point for a lot of people when it comes to philosophy. So yeah. And then, okay, so I'll just start talking about The Republic first. So The Republic by Plato is basically about asking a lot of the moral and social questions about art, politics, women, and everything. And many people say it's a good introduction to philosophy because it covers a lot of ground in terms of like the various branches in philosophy, like ethics, political philosophy, and also metaphysics. So yeah, like I mentioned, it asks a lot of questions about people's moral nature, why do we follow rules, and why is it, and or maybe is it because we're afraid of the consequences in society? And also it asks about what exactly is justice, and is justice really good, and all that. And I think the most famous excerpt in it is probably the Allegory of the Cave, where Plato basically says education and learning about more things enlightens the human soul and compares us, before we become educated, as stuck in the dark cave and having no will to leave or change things. But once we see the light, we're like led outside of like the dark cave into like the world. So yeah. So I'm still in the process of reading it actually. I kind of took a break and turned to read other things, but it is easier to relatively understand than some other books. And I think if you guys want to actually start working to read a standard sequential book in philosophy, then this is a very good book to start with. And then next is Credo, and that one is really short. It's just under 40 pages, I think, and it's about Socrates, one of my favorite philosophers, basically sitting in his prison right before his execution. And if you guys know anything about Socrates, he was basically being very rebellious and didn't listen to the higher ups in Athens when they told him to stop questioning the traditional gods and asking philosophical questions to like corrupt the youth, basically, to sum it up in really simple terms. And so basically he's sitting in his prison cell and one of his friend Crito arrives and tries to persuade him to escape. And Socrates basically refuses because he contemplates about how like everything in his life was dictated by law. Like his parents' marriage was made sacred by law, and basically he recognizes that he was voted by citizens to be sent to jail, and he doesn't want to violate the law of Athens and all that. And you guys know the story. So after this, he drinks the hemlock poison soup and he dies, unfortunately. Sorry for spoiling. And yeah. So basically, this deals a lot with justice, and the two main parts of it is content justice and procedural justice. And Socrates basically spends a lot of his time arguing that procedural justice is more important than content justice, because that's to maintain status quo and basically how everything was and has always been. So yeah. And then finally, the Apology is basically a preface to Crito where Socrates makes his actual court case to appeal his charges initially, and says that he didn't in fact corrupt the youth. And it's very casual and conversational because Socrates establishes in the beginning that he doesn't want to talk very formally despite being in court. So that was kind of like his first step in defiance. So it's not really an apology if you ask me, it's more like an excuse. So yeah. And then the other recommendation I had was Being in Time by Heidegger. And this one is it's very long, first of all, and it deals with what is being in relationship to time. And it basically says that because time is finite, the concept of being is able to exist. And since all human beings exist temporarily and eventually face death, we're all basically a being towards death. That's like one word. And death should be considered an essential part of being an authentic human being. And sorry, someone just entered. And then, so yeah, it has a very long introduction. And if you guys want, I can do a separate workshop on it to get into more of the details. But it was kind of a hard read for me, honestly. It's very hard to like comprehend like everything that he's saying and just like absorb all the information. So yeah. And he also invents a lot of words and within his book. So one of the examples of a word that he keeps using is design, which is presence of self, and inauthentic versus authentic existence. So yeah. What else did I want to say about authentic and inauthentic? Okay. Oh yeah. So authentic is existence. Basically, is when you finally accept that you as a human being will die soon and have limited time. But Heidegger suggests that most people will not do this, and therefore most of us live in a state of inauthentic existence. Yeah, it's very complicated. And then next we have No Exit, which is a play by Sartre. And it's very like fun and easy compared to like the other books that I've just mentioned. And so what I thought was particularly interesting about this book is that it's not really a philosophy book in the traditional sense. Like compared to Being in Time, it's not suddenly talking about like what is time, like what is being and all that, but rather it presents the philosophical argument in a more indirect and crafty way. So Sartre implies a lot of his philosophical thoughts within the play about self-deception and how the perception of others or the gaze of your neighbors affects you and your own freedom. And basically the plot line is that 3 people are convicted and brought into a room for eternal punishment, or basically until they die, they can't leave the room. And we don't really know exactly why they got arrested, and that is one of the things that they continue to discuss throughout the play. And they expect a torture room when they get to the place of punishment, but they instead arrive in like a really plainly decorated room with nice furniture and lighting, etc. And basically what they come to realize is that hell is actually other people. So their form of punishment is actually each other, because they realize that the gaze of others restrict their own freedom of existence, and they constantly like look into mirrors to avoid others' judgment and their looks onto themselves. So once again, yeah, it's not really a traditional philosophy book, but I think it has a lot of philosophical thoughts within the play itself about self-deception and all of that. So it's very interesting, and I urge you guys to check it out. And yeah, and also I think in No Exit, there's also a double metaphor in the sense that the whole thing is actually a play. So the actors, when they present the play, they're essentially acting, right? Which ties into this self-deception theme. And once again, the audience is looking at the authors and actors and judging and perceiving the play, which I think is the double effect that Sartre wanted. So they're also judging the actors, who are judging each other in the play. So yeah. Does anyone else have any other recommendations that you guys want to share in the chat? You guys can just write something down. Or if you guys are planning to read any books. No? Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining. And so I'll stop the recording right now. Hold on.